I'm a product manager at Lokalise, and I've joined from the localization industry. And when I've joined, I've met Thomas, and he told me about, he shared a document in our internal wiki about this localization maturity models. And it was very interesting because it was all prepared by Thomas himself without referring to a model from Common Sense Advisory. And why it's interesting, because it's based on Thomas' experience in Moravia, and now it's RWS, and now it's SDL, RWS, whatever. So Thomas, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. I'm Tomas Franc. I'm a Localization Solutions Architect with more than 20 years of experience in localization industry. And when I started, when I joined a Lokalise team, I've been asked to prepare something like this maturity model that should help to understand our sales guys better, our customers, when they are talking to the customers and understanding their needs, their pains, so they can get better prepared. And for example, if there is someone on the in the localization industry for 10 years, it definitely won't be interesting for them to get a presentation on how translation memory works. So this was the basic idea behind that. I got inspired by publicly available materials out there on the net, not really by the CSA, even though I realized afterwards that it's quite close to each other. But the thing was that it was first based on my own experience, and second adapted to the needs of our sales team. So it's slightly more actionable and covering this topic from multiple perspectives, not only the localization process itself, but also, as you can see on the first slide, from the internationalization, automation, vendor management, and business processes.
Mm-hmm. So let me introduce the rules. First, Thomas will present an overview of the model in about 20 minutes or something like that, and then we will answer the questions, which you could post at the questions tab in the UI. And that's all. I will increase the slide. And Thomas, can you present us an overview of the model, please?
Yeah. So as it's publicly available, these maturity models for almost any business. This is related to the localization, and it reflects these 5 levels. The difference is that we actually resigned on naming these levels, because squeezing all the problematic into a single word, it's usually a bit misleading. So we decided to go with just the level 1 from the very beginning, when you start to be just curious, to the stellar level 5, where everything is shiny and there are no problems whatsoever. So and these horizontal bands actually shows the span of the primary focus across the levels. This is something I haven't seen anywhere else, but I found it quite useful illustration how actually you should start to think about the business, what to focus on first, whether you find yourself on the level 2 or level 4, what is of the most importance for you. And this is exactly what we believe is the major value for you in this presentation, which should be your takeaway. is to figure out what's ahead. If you imagine you are in certain situation with limited capacity, with limited amount of money, then there are tons of problems to be solved. And if you don't pick those problems to be solved within your reach wisely, then you might end up stuck in a situation that you basically won't achieve the best possible results. So on each level, there's a certain focus, and imagine like if you are on the very first level, then probably the functional internationalization functional bugs will be way more important to have fixed rather than polishing the translation, because if you release an unusable, buggy application, nobody would care about the quality of your translation. Everybody will be complaining about functionality. So at the very first level, it might be obvious, but might not be that obvious on the other levels. And for those who are on the third, fourth level, you might just be curious what's next, what can be done differently, what can be done better. And the thing is, not to opt for a solution which then can basically stop you from further development in a sense of the localization maturity. So let's start with the level 1. The characteristics of the level 1, probably it's obvious. You are just getting curious what it is about to release your very first localized version of your product. So you don't want what to expect. You're curious, experimenting, playing with the CAD tools, and usually it's a one-man show. Sometimes it might come from the C-level suite, instruction, hey, this might be of some value for us, explore and perform the research. What does it mean for us to even start internationalization? And where you should focus on this level is precisely on the internationalization. I would not say only, but primarily. To have put in place a process which then other developers in your team will be ready to follow precisely, so you can decrease any potential occurrence of internationalization bugs or even functional bugs in your localized versions. Play with some CAD tools, figure out, learn what does it mean, what is the translation memory, how does it work, how it can decrease the translation effort, and don't focus much on the translation and the translation quality as such, because right now your ultimate goal is to get your product localized. Even considering the round trip with machine translated content is just fine. And once you have solved these challenges, you can find yourself on the level 2, which is basically characterized as a rapid growth in terms of translation volumes, because usually it's being discovered as an area with potential for further growth, target market penetration, new revenue streams. So there's quite a high demand, and hand in hand, you will realize, hey, we need to speed up the things. That's why that you will have to solve the automation as well. And if you look at the chart, you can see that basically on the level 2 is the biggest chunk of work that you have to cope with. You should finalize basically your internationalization, so to decrease occurrence of potential internationalization bugs, you have to be slightly more rigorous and focusing on describing your process. I mean, localization process. You should start thinking about how to actually align your localization process with these overarching business goals, so that if you want to go on the target market with your localized product, then probably or what's your goal? Is it a speed, turnaround time that it's ultimately necessary? Is it the quality, or is it the price? It all depends on the business goals. So you should be aware of it and try to think about how to align these business goals with the what will be the impact on the localization. On the level 2, you probably will experience this loop, because, as I said, you will experience demand for faster TAT, but at the same time, your quality usually suffer. So you will be more pushy on your vendors or linguists to do something about the quality. And at the end, if you manage somehow to increase the quality, which is not really managed, this is just your wish at this level, you will soon realize, hey, this is something that is way too pricey. We should do something about the costs. And while solving all this stuff together, you still find yourself on the level 2, because in order to move into a level 3, you should think about KPIs, style guides, so to make the localization process way more rigorous, streamlined, and defined and documented, and potentially putting in place the LQA KPIs, so you can define what quality in a quantitative measures you are getting from your LSPs or vendors or partners, so you can compare, hey, is this quality good enough for me for the price, or is it something that I can be more pushy on the price and I'm fine with the lower quality, or is it price for the value is way too high, then I can invite for a RFP yet another vendor to compare, to be able to compare. Because when are you on the second level and you most likely invite someone to help you, like LSP, you are somewhat blind, because you have to trust him, even though you can do some here and there spot check using your internal linguists or marketing departments in target markets. Then still it's hard to quantify, hard to compare the quality you are getting from the others. So on the level 2, you will be experiencing quite uneven quality delivered by linguists. Whereas on the third level, you should be aware of these linguistic quality KPIs and be able to compare it together and to know what are you actually getting for your money. As for the automation on the level 3, your automation should be pretty robust with some last moment requests, rush jobs that needs to be handled at the very last moment, and your automation probably wouldn't be ready for it. It will cover about 90% of your needs, your production, but still there might be some teams or departments that are not fully plugged in and still will not be able to get the full benefit of the unified automation environment and approach. So, and what to focus on the level 3? It's basically time to start thinking about your own TMS. If you haven't done it yet and you rely on your LSP provider, then try to think about adopting your own TMS, so you become more independent on LSP. And in case of problems, you can either onboard a new one or switch to a new one. And definitely the focus on the third level is a further automation and deeper integration with the business processes. So if you manage all this stuff and you wonder what expects you on the fourth level, then it can be characterized that most likely on this fourth level you already have your own localization department. Whether level 3 is usually with a dedicated localization manager and probably a small team. On the fourth level, you probably have already your own localization departments with well-documented processes, with fully automated framework, where even these last moment changes has its own process, so it's not a firefighting for you anymore. And all your internal teams, including marketing, documentation, is onboarded, and it's easy for you to switch or onboard new LSP. It's relatively easy to onboard new products if there's an acquisition of other company, then their robust processes for onboarding new products in terms of internationalization and the localization. So I don't say there are no problems, but thanks to these processes, it's way more streamlined and there is way less headaches and firefights. And what actually can be done better on the fifth level comparing to the fourth level? It's shifting from fourth level to fifth level is about continuous improvements. It's very important to figure out that if you put together a processes, automation, everything, you might easily get stuck with this if you don't adjust it. I've seen it in the past couple times that biggest companies were stuck with their own technology, 10, 15 years behind recent trends or industry. And the problem is that that it becomes quite rigid soon. So how to overcome and how to get to the fifth level is actually that you incorporate in your business processes innovations, that you stimulate innovations. You can make it a part of personal goals and objectives for key members of the localization process. So they are basically evaluated based on or partially based on their contribution to modifying this localization process, to innovating this localization process. This is something that it's basically just a wish. I haven't, in my past career, I haven't seen any company on that level yet. Partially, yes, but not fully in all these areas you can see here. And for the level 5, if you manage to get there and you think that everything will be cool and shiny and you can celebrate, well, no, actually, it's you have to think about quite a high cost of maintenance, because your process and your automation and integration is so massive that it requires quite a massive investments and costs to maintain it. And as localization technology evolves, and you want to keep the pace with this industry, then you will be redesigning all over again. And sometimes when your team is changing, you will be opening a new department. You will soon realize that one of your teams is working on the third level instead of the fifth level, and you still have to do something about it to adjust it and make them working better, so it can be shift to higher levels as well. But in general, why to actually bother even about these levels is about efficiency. It's all about efficiency and internal costs, and because the lower levels are full of mistakes and trials and errors, which is costly. So it's all about decreasing the internal overheads and increasing the overall efficiency, where you are able to produce enormous amount of translated content within unbelievable short time.
And if I can add to this last level, I remember when I was in pros.com, one of the biggest technology companies reached to us, and they have a problem. They were so efficient, and they have all process so streamlined that when there was some ad hoc request to translate something, there was no way to do it. You have to, because everything was so automated, and if your content appears somewhere outside of the pipeline, there was no way to do it. So they were doing some pretty crazy stuff to inject this content into source code, then it will go into this automated pipeline just to get translated and approved and so on. So there is a lot of call for flexibility when your process is streamlined to like translate millions of words per year. There is a call for flexibility sometimes when you're exploring new products and territories. And we have a lot of questions by the time. So Thomas, do you are comfortable starting with questions?
Yeah, I find.
Okay, so I'll start with the top upvoted ones. So the first question is about quality KPIs, which focused on amount of missed errors rather than how good is UX of internationalized product. And Tucker is asking about how does the evolving quality process affect this traditional maturity model, and is there a room for innovation in quality, and in quality of translation or in quality of process? What do you think?
Or quality of the product.
Quality of the product, or the quality of experience, because sometimes it's
Yeah. Definitely, everything evolves, and it's hard to say that hey, this is done, and there is nothing else. Even if you look at the LQA and approach to LQA, there are vast amount of different approaches. There's a attempt for de facto standardization from TAOs. So it's being widely adopted. These score sheets, scorecards. So then you can plug it in. If you don't know exactly what are you looking at, my suggestion is try to research. It's nothing wrong to start with this just DQF from TAOs and adjust it according to your own experience, according to your needs. That's all I can say for that. The good thing would be to align your quality KPIs and metrics with your vendors, with your LSPs and linguists. So whenever they say, hey, we achieved this pass or borderline pass because of this and that, then your own linguist will be arbitrating on this quality, can follow exactly the same rules, guidelines, and score sheets. So you produce basically the same results, comparable results. I think that comparability across these vendors and producers is more important than actually the scorecard itself.
Okay, and I just quickly add that if you're working on a small scale product, not like on a big scale, it's very helpful to look at product metrics like retention, maybe acquisition of new users, to see whether people from localized versions are bringing more revenue, or maybe they have better ratings in your marketplace and stuff. And it gives a pretty nice impression of what's going on if you're working on a small scale applications, and you can like intuitively get through all of them manually.
Yeah. And if you're talking about KPIs based on errors rather than improving UX, this is a slightly different topic. And it's not just about localization. It's about how your end users adopts your product. How do they like it? And user experience is something that it's very hard to measure and very hard to turn into KPIs. I think that for a mobile app and for the web app, it might be a different metrics, different ways how to measure it, and how to make a decision based on that.
So let's stop at this point and switch to another question, because we can go really deep here. Okay.
Okay.
And there is a question from Valeria. What do you mean exactly by process fully automated? And this is a good catch.
Good question. What does it mean fully? Define fully. Usually, what I understand under fully automated means that there are no these firefighting or last moment rush jobs. So even for the last moment changes, there is a predefined process how to do it, and everybody in your company knows how to use it, where to put the files, and when to expect results. So it's about the expectations and how the technology is set up and how to work with that. For me it means fully automated. Even though there might be some manual steps, there always be a room for further automation up until the point where we will be implanted with some chip in the brain, and on our computer will appear an instant translation of what we are thinking about. Then there will be still a room for some further improvements and further automations. But for me, it's important to know that these nasty rush jobs and firefighting belongs to the past.
Yeah, and like from the product management point of view, it feels that when you can call the process fully automated if anybody can go to vacation, and it will not slow down the delivery of a product. So like at Lokalise, we have these integrations, and it's not dependent on particular developer to copy or export or import strings. It's not dependent on the content manager to copy post, let's say from WordPress or whatever CMS into some file and then move it and then copy it back. So when you have know these dependencies, it could be fully automated, even though for rare request, it could be manual processed, but it's like rare request, not the main pipeline of content, right?
Yeah. So basically anyone who is participating in the process can take vacations, except the developer, who is responsible for the automation.
Yeah.
It can be disaster.
Yeah, and if there's error, it escalates for manual process, of course. It's not like always happening. Okay, and there is another question from Sophia. Do you have any tips on how to integrate localization the best way into agile and into iterative development cycle? When there are new features, it seems to slow down the release process of those.
Really? Then I can I cannot do anything but marketing for Localize, if you don't mind. There are tools on the market which can seamlessly integrate with Git repository, and whenever there appears a new update, new feature, then it gets immediately pushed inside this translation tool, and translators get notification. Yeah, and one of these is Localized. So it is even possible.
It's not only about tools, it's about the process also. For example, some companies choose to wait until the new strings from a feature are fully localized, right? Before they ship it. Other companies use over-the-air translation delivery, so they can ship a feature as it is and submit it to, like, let's say, marketplace if you're using a web application. So it will go through this 1 week of approval cycle, and by the time people who are actually using it as a users will download an update, your TMS will deliver your new translations there. So you will not wait, you will not postpone the release or shipment of new version. And also, again, it's about automation. You don't need to, like, if you automate this import-export steps, you will have less blocks, and means less time to wait, right?
And funny enough, it would deserve here a bit of explanation. What do you understand as agile? Because continuous and agile, everybody understands a slightly different. I've been working with customer who has 1 week release cycle, and at the very beginning they said, "Hey, not a problem for us to do a freeze for 2 days. What will be is new content. It's going to be translated during these days, and then we will pick it up and release." Soon they realize, wait a moment, what if our developers needs to produce a new content, do the fixes even during those 2 days. So if you deliver on Friday morning, then you have to pick the content for past 2 days and still translate it and be ready for the afternoon release. And soon we realize, hey, wouldn't be better to pick every single day the content and deliver during the next day? Okay, fine, but it soon wasn't sufficient at all. So we have to shift to an hourly handoffs, and translations was written between 4 to 8 hours. And some customers imagine that seamless and agile means it's the new content is being picked basically every other minute or so. So you should be a bit careful about it. You should define yourself what your needs are, and then to look what's available out there, what would help you to address your needs. Because when dealing with these high cadency handoffs close to a continuous translations, might be in some sense quite costly in the end.
Yeah, and it's all about automation. You cannot do this if you do it manually. You cannot even do this daily pickups, for example, right? And be too costly. Let's move to the next most upvoted question. Is about what's the Tom is asking, what's the benefit of the level 5th of versus the level 4, given this huge maintenance costs that you mentioned? Wouldn't it be better to stay on level 4?
Thanks for this question. It doesn't mean that being on level 5 it implies a huge maintenance cost. It basically increases from the level 1 to level 5. So on the level 4, comparing to level 5, it's more or less comparable because you're almost there. The difference between level 4 and level 5 is that if you get stuck on level 4, your technology and the processes during the time might get obsolete. Whereas on the 5th level, you are incorporating processes that helps you to stay relevant and be flexible in terms of adopting the newest industry standards. So you're basically evolving your process.
And it's more about investing into flexibility. Like one of enterprise customers of Lokalise, they have this a fully fledged localization department with well-established processes and stuff. But at the same time, their R&D department has a green light to experiment with new tools, experiment with new workflows, just to see whether there is something beneficial to adopt.
Yep. And let me guess, they discovered translation memory.
Okay, let's move to the next. Most upvoted question is from Neon.
How do you automate localization version control in the source?
Tomas?
It's basically it's about synchronicity, about synchronization. Whenever you update the source, then there must be a indication that, hey, these strings, these translations are no longer valid. These are obsolete and need your attention, needs to be put into the process of translation again. So it's not about necessarily about versioning as such, because for you it's important just to keep the most recent version, but you should know which version is the most recent. whether your current translations are in sync with the most recent version of the source or not. It's not about version control as such, but I haven't seen it in any CAT tools except MemoQ, where there's for every update on the source is one major version, and on any change on the translation is a minor version. So you can roll back, which is great, but and you can actually compare these versions together to get a sense what has been changed from one version to another. But I haven't seen it anywhere else.
Yeah, but it's common, for example, in medical industry. When you ship in a product in medical industry, you have to go through certification, and you cannot change source code of like, which is part of the product of the medical device you are shipping. You cannot change after certification. So you have to deal with this kind of hard versions. And in this case, you usually use tags or whatever your system allows. Usually you use tags, or you use specific custom statuses like approved or whatever. And if something changed, you just drop the status and start again.
If you need to keep a certain status of your project in the time, in Lokalise we have a snapshots, or potentially, as you mentioned, Alex, that you're not allowed to get any updates, then it might the branching might work well when you simply freeze one of your branches for a certain version and continue updating and working on the other branch, and at the end you either you can wipe out, or you can merge it together.
Okay, and we are like close to like a timeout, so we have time for one question, but there are like two questions with 4 upvotes. So let's go with two of them. The first question is from Sophia. How can localization be coordinated the best way from feature release to get English, I guess English copy, to localization to final review? So I guess it's like release, get English copyright, get it localized to multiple language, and get it reviewed. Do you have any references to share, Thomas?
Probably not.
And
what's the best way from feature release to getting English translation to localization to final review? I think this would this sounds to me as a pretty standard job that why the TMS tools actually emerged to take care of it from the release that is being pushed by developers into the repository. Then it's to by TMS for, you might introduce a English review, translation and translation review. I think it sounds to me as not an extra challenging task. If I'm missing something, please get back to us via email with more details, and we will be happy to dig deeper into it and respond.
And the last question we would be able to cover is, it's jumped somewhere. One moment. Yeah, so it's about the criteria. What criteria can be used to judge if dedicated resources are needed for localization? When you are not as Moravia scale, I guess, right? So when you are just a small startup, how do you decide when to hire the first dedicated person?
Dedicated resource. If you feel that you lack enough expertise to do the job properly, that its complexity breaks the roof, and your developers are yelling at you that they are not supposed to take care about the handoffs. They don't know how to set glossary, what to do with the translation memory, that they are supposed to develop and not to do this. So I think that's exactly the right time to hire someone who is experienced in the localization and can help you define the processes, figure out what tool would work for you best, how to qualify the partner whom you can trust to. So I think this is exactly the point in time when your team starts to feel nervous about the localization.
And what I found working at small companies is that you usually want to get a new person who is responsible for not just localization, the first person, but for globalization, who understands like all the processes needed to get your company or your product used in international markets. And usually it's by the time you want to you have some goals to get international revenue. Let's say you plan the next year to have 10% of revenue coming from abroad. At this point, you usually better off have somebody dedicated to this rather than add this as a responsibility to somebody who is already doing a lot of stuff, because most likely then it will fail miserably and not work well. And we have a few unanswered questions, but we are right now we are out of time. So what we will do, we will collect these questions and answer them via email to make sure that everybody has their questions answered. Okay, and I just want to thank you for your time, and thanks Thomas for sharing the localization maturity model you've built for Lokalise and sharing it with us. And let's have a great day. See you.
See you guys. Bye.